First off, let's make one thing perfectly clear. Hamilton is a must-watch, especially because you can now watch it as part of your Disney Plus subscription. Before, it was hard to get tickets. Tickets were very expensive. But now, you really need to watch it. Why? Well, it's about American history. This is the perfect time to release it for the 4th of July holiday. It made Broadway history. Huge hit, game-changing hit for the industry in terms of the talent that it brought to the stage. And it's currently making Hollywood history. That's because the entire cast, except for Jonathan Groff, were pretty much unknowns when Hamilton debuted on Broadway back in 2015. It seems so long ago. But today, while many people have still not seen Hamilton the musical, we've pretty much all seen some of the main cast members across various Hollywood productions. And now, having seen Hamilton for the first time myself on Disney Plus, well, the screener they gave me, but it's the same experience, I can say that Hollywood still hasn't utilized this amazing cast at their best. In particular, I have never seen Daveed Diggs or Leslie Odom Jr. as good as they are here. I now get why Hollywood is pushing them so hard. I can't understand why they can't replicate their brilliance here. I don't think Hollywood's trying hard enough, quite frankly. We'll talk about Daveed Diggs as Sebastian. Yes, we will. So the way I'm going to structure this review, though, is that first I'm going to review the film presentation of Hamilton, how Disney Plus has put this onto their service, because a lot was made of that. Disney paid $75 million for it, and then I'll review the musical itself. All right, so the film presentation. When it comes to Hamilton, I think Disney jumped the gun. Yes, I couldn't resist the gun pun. Some of you might not know your history, so I don't want to give too much away. But you should know this, but we'll talk about it. But anyway, don't worry, no spoilers. Because I have mixed feelings on the amount of history that Hamilton delivers. So anyway, when it was first announced, we were promised the best seat in the house. But now having seen it, I feel like I actually had one of the worst seats in the house, which was very frustrating. I think in order to show the whole stage and all the choreography, which is impressive, they have a cool moving part of the stage, and they do utilize the entire stage. But that means that the camera is often quite far away from the actors. You know, when you're actually watching it live, you can turn your attention to where you want to look at something, right? But you still are close enough to have the exhilarating feel of being close to the performer. And that, you don't have a choice here. It's a wide shot. I mean, there are very few close-ups, surprisingly so, considering, again, what was promised to us. Also, the sound mix is very poor, particularly in the first act. It is hard to hear a lot of the lyrics over the music. And it's all lyrics. There is no dialogue in Hamilton. Subtitles were not available, at least on the screener. I became so frustrated during the first act and my inability to understand what they were saying a lot of the times, I checked for subtitles. I was like, I'm just going to turn the subtitles on. But I did not have that option. It's also impossible to replicate the electricity of seeing a live performance and the room full of other people around you who are sharing that experience. You know, it's impossible. They could never, no matter what they did, they couldn't recreate that. Also, for all the promises of this inventive filming, remember they're like, we filmed it 3 times from different types of performances. Also, while we were able to be on stage and we cut it all together. But now having seen it, it looks like every other filmed adaptation I've ever seen of something that's on the stage. You would never tell they did anything special or they filmed more than one performance, quite frankly. Maybe 2 because of the technical aspects of it, but it doesn't seem any different than any other filmed, again, stage performance. So you feel very far removed from the event, which is what's so great about live theater. So at many points, you feel the 2-hour and 40-minute runtime. That is very long, rather than having it fly by, as I'm sure it did in person. There is a 1-minute intermission in the film version. I also feel that watching from home, with lyrics in the first act that are hard to hear, and a first act that overall is hard to follow. For example, it's difficult to tell who a lot of the secondary characters are. The end credits, by the way, have the cast's pictures. It's a little bit like the end of Beauty and the Beast, those credits. Remember those? So they'll show a picture of the actor, and then they'll list the historical figure, or in some cases figures, which I think also might confuse people. Some actors are playing multiple characters. but you'll see, you get to make that visual match. And I think that maybe they should have aired that at the beginning of the film. And so also there are like a lot of blanks, historical wise. They go through the Revolutionary War so fast, it'll make your head spin. So since you're at home and you feel like you're not actually there, the temptation is very strong. In my case, irresistible to pick up your phone or your tablet and Google some things to try and fill in the blanks. First I was like, who is that actor playing? Let me Google it. And then I was like, who is that? Let me Google it. Because the musical didn't do that work. It not only didn't do that work, but it didn't distract me with something else where I was like, who cares who it is? I have faith that they'll tell me in a moment. I was like, I don't know, and I want to find out. So I think if you were there, obviously, you can't take out your phone. So you would just, you'd just be like, I'm kind of confused. And also you could look at your playbill beforehand, or you could glance down at it during the show. But here, you don't have a playbill, you have your phone. And so you glance down at that instead. So I think that was problematic. I think it would have been far better for them to just wait and film a proper movie version of Hamilton, complete with sets and locations. I was thinking about that while I was watching it. I was like, oh, if only I could really see this. And I think having the sets and the locations in a film, well, Thomas Kail did a great job directing. He directed the original Hamilton on stage, but he also did Fosse Verdon. He did a phenomenal job there. But I think it would have been great to have the sets and locations. I think would have helped to tell the story as another layer that they would have had. And I think it would have taken the whole production to the next level. And I think they're still planning to do that, but part of me wonders if they can after everyone will feel they've already seen it. And it's such a big commitment at 2 hours and 40 minutes, I think it might be hard to get some people to make that commitment once again. But let's talk about the musical. The second act of Hamilton is so good, even a poorly filmed version of it cannot hide its brilliance. Yes, as you can guess, I did not care for the first act. I was really nervous watching it. I was like, oh, how am I going to review this? Everyone loves this. And then after the second act came on, I was like, oh, now I see. But for the first act, I'm not a fan of opera. And to me, the first act is very operatic. I'm sorry, I don't like opera. And so if you don't like opera, you'll probably find yourself in a similar situation that I did. I also felt it was confusing, as I said again, light on historical facts. I felt after watching the first act, I was like, I'm learning nothing. I'm learning nothing about American history here. But don't worry, the second act fixes it. And also, I thought the first act was very monotone. I think that except for one fantastic break with Jonathan Groff's King George, we'll talk about the cast in its own section, but it felt like one long, hour-long single song. Like you're like, how long is the song going to keep going on for? It just was very monotonous. So the first act, I want to point out, does have its moments. For instance, the famous line from the musical "Immigrants, We Get the Job Done" is in the first act, and it is absolutely fantastic. It was one of the only moments because they had a live audience when they were filming this, at least part of the time, and it was the only time, one of the few times the live audience reacted, because it was such a great line, and also the choreography gave the audience a moment to react. But especially in the first act, for most of the first act, things are moving so quickly, and it's so hard to follow, you have to pay so close attention that there's no room for the audience to react. I was going to do a watch-along for this, but the running time and the fact that it's wall-to-wall and just so dense, I don't feel it's appropriate for me to talk over it in a live reaction as I do in a watch-along. And so I think you'll see that lack of reaction from, I don't think that, it's not that they're not enjoying it, but especially for the first act, they're like, don't say anything, we might miss something. All right, so right at the end of the first act, though, like I'd say exactly at the hour mark, I know because I paused it because I had to do something, and I looked and I was like, oh my God, I have an hour and 40 minutes to go on this. But then it got great. I couldn't believe it. So I happened to pause it just when it was, just at that turning point. So an hour in, they flip the switch, and this thing does a total 180, and to me becomes incredibly strong for the rest of the run. And as I've told you before, the ending is what audiences will remember. And Hamilton has such a strong second half, it more than makes up for the weaker first half. You leave a believer. I think that's how people left the theater, and how you will, when you turn off this event on Disney Plus, you will have the positivity of that second act. I loved the second act. The second act conveys a lot of historical facts. I was thrilled. I learned stuff. I think that's really important when you're doing any kind of historical entertainment. It has many different types of music and dance, which gives it variety. It makes it much more pleasant and fun to watch. And it introduces, I think this is crucial, Rex Harrison-style dialogue. You know what I'm talking about if you're a fan of musicals. It's technically still singing, but slowed down enough to give the audience a breather and also get across important information. And really, it allows you to feel like you get to know the characters better. It lets you in, so I appreciated that a lot. It also has not just one, but two amazing cabinet rap battles. I loved that. Those were fantastic between Jefferson and Hamilton. They are a must-see. The historical accuracy and insight in the lyrics is nothing short of brilliant. I loved it. The second act also features my favorite song, really the only song I really truly enjoyed. I could have, it was very expensive to see Hamilton live in New York. And I was tempted to go because of the rave reviews it was getting, but I didn't care for the music, to be honest with you. And I felt there was so much money for my family was thinking of going, for us to go, like thousands of dollars. We're like, well, if we don't love the music, that's a lot to pay. But I have to say, I did think the song The Room Where It Happens was fantastic. You know I love business and negotiating, and that's what that song is about, and I loved it. I also applaud Lin Manuel Miranda for highlighting both the positive and negative aspects of Hamilton's life. Very honest. I know some people feel that the musical isn't honest enough, but it shows a lot of bad stuff that Hamilton did. And it's also, I think, it's very, very appropriate for today, what's going on, although the musical is meant to bring us all together, to show a shared experience. And I do worry that some people will walk away from this thinking it's divisive. It's kind of like a manual for how to have a revolution in some ways you could look at it. But let's remember that we're all Americans and the American spirit in us is the same. As I've said before, and I think this musical, by recasting with actors of color, these historical figures, it highlights that no one can control what body they're born into and where on the earth they start. And it could happen to that person, it could happen to you. And so I think that's to me what this underscores, and that what our similarities are. And I hope this reminds people of our similarities instead of making it seem divisive. I hope people get I truly believe that's what Lin Manuel Miranda meant. But anyway, back to Hamilton's, not being so perfect, right? And there's a lot of discussion today about historical figures, and obviously a lot of people have flaws. If you look at their personal lives, and Hamilton is no exception. The one thing I'll share here, there's a lot of crazy stuff here, and again, some of it actually pertains to some of the arguments that are happening today. But for instance, Hamilton marries one sister and still flirts with another, as the musical itself says. Damn! I love that. That was hysterical. As for the cast, I cannot believe that I'm saying this, but Daveed Diggs is by far and away my favorite in the entire musical. I have not been able to get Daveed Diggs. I was like, why is everyone pushing Daveed Diggs? He's always, to me, fallen short whenever I've seen him. But here, I got it. This guy's fantastic. And again, I feel bad that Hollywood has not been able to find him a suitable follow-up role. I actually think he'll make a great Sebastian, having now seen this. He makes for a fun Lafayette in the first act. I like his French accent. But his Jefferson in the second act is to die for. It is a flawless, electric, perfect performance. I could not say enough good things about it. It is, again, a must-see. And right behind him is Jonathan Groff as King George. I'm a huge Jonathan Groff fan, as many of you know. I liked him when he showed up on Glee. I liked him in Looking. I loved him in Mindhunter. He's incredibly talented. He's, of course, Kristoff from Frozen. I wish he would get more work. But he's so good here. He only shows up a few times, but every time he too delivers a perfect performance. And also, Diggs and Groff were the only two actors who made, I think they have the most comedic parts, but they made me laugh out loud several times. I thought they were both, again, as I said, perfect performances. Leslie Odom Jr. is also fantastic as Aaron Burr. It's not as flashy a performance as the other two, but it's a more nuanced performance. He's, of course, a very good singer, but where he really shines and where he differentiates himself from everyone else, and his role is different as well. It's not just his performance, but the role that Lin Manuel Miranda wrote for him. But it's a nuanced, dramatic performance which shows how Burr goes from being Hamilton's first friend in America to, well, I won't spoil it again if you don't know your history. I want to make sure I try and pronounce his name correctly. Okiriete Onadawan. I'm sure I butchered that, but he's fantastic. I didn't want to not mention him, even though it's difficult to say his name. He actually also plays two roles, but in the second act, he has a very strong, understated presence on stage, as Jefferson's right-hand man, James Madison. He actually made me interested in James Madison, which is so exciting. It's exhilarating what this show is able to do, and I think making American history relatable to today's audiences. He was fantastic. I'm surprised that he hasn't gotten more work off of this. He was so good. And of course, everyone in the cast does a good job, but to me, those were the standouts. But what about Lin Manuel Miranda, right? Well, unfortunately, I feel as a singer and as an actor, he is the weakest in the show. I'm sorry to say it, except with the rap battles, where he excels. He's fantastic in the rap battles. But the reason Lin Manuel Miranda is the star of this show, and the reason that his star still shines so bright, despite him being the weakest performer, is that he thought the whole thing up. This was his idea. I'm a big believer, and if you thought something up, you should get the credit for it. He came up with the idea to tell the story of America's first immigrants with today's immigrants, and he wrote all the music, and he wrote all the lyrics. He did a phenomenal job. Again, I think the first act is weak, but the second act is so good, I'll forgive him for the first act. And he's well-intentioned enough as a performer and okay enough as a performer that he doesn't bring the whole thing down by casting himself in the lead. Would it have been better if he'd maybe been a supporting actor and had someone else in the lead who was maybe at the same level of charisma as Diggs and Groff? Maybe, but I feel that Lin Manuel Miranda's offstage story and his decision to do this and that he came up with it has become as much of the Hamilton mythology as the show itself that I think he should be the star. I think in this case it works. Also, he's smart enough to surround himself with top-notch performers who are able to carry his performance the rest of the way. The show is special because of Lin Manuel Miranda's work as a lyricist and a songwriter and a producer, and Diggs and Groff's performances, and Odom Jr. Just really phenomenal stuff. And it's a smaller role, but Odom. I think the female, I feel bad on not mentioning any of the female actors, the actresses. They have some good moments, but think about women in that time period. They weren't really a part of society. They certainly weren't making any decisions. So, I think you have to respect that Lin Manuel Miranda. He could have been like, let's make a bigger. I think he made the women's roles as big as he could for the time period. I think it works, and it was what it was, and you should show that. There's one funny line where someone is I don't want to give it away, but is campaigning for the presidency, and he goes up to some women and he says, it's like whatever century it is, and he's like, ladies, tell your husbands to vote for me because they can't vote. That was great. That was, it was true. It was funny because it was true, and it also it was funny sad, but it was good. So that's my review of Hamilton on Disney+. I think it's a mixed bag, but overall it's fantastic. Definitely worth seeing, and I feel that this would have been much better as a actual film. There's another very good patriotic musical that I also suggest you watch over the holiday weekend, 1776. I love that musical. I'm going to watch it myself. And that was also originated on the stage, but they did a filmed version of it, which is a full movie with sets and locations again. And I think if we had the chance to see Hamilton in that way, I think it would really have, been a home run. Here, I think it's nice. It's here now. I think this way, it's a nice thing that people who couldn't or didn't want to spend the money to go and see it live, the substantial amount of money, can still experience it. It's that's nice. It's a nice thing to do. But it would have, I think, been like a huge Oscar winner and stuff if they had done a film version. Do you think they could still do a film version? I'm so in love with the idea that maybe like in a year or so, I would maybe consider still trying. Because I think when this is good, you don't get better than this. All right, so again, that's my review of Hamilton on Disney+. I'm curious to hear your thoughts down below. Both those of you seeing it for the first time, like myself. I'm curious why you didn't see it on the stage, because it's toured as well. And then also, I'd like to know what you think if you did see it on stage. What you think of the film adaptation compared to the experience that you had live. All right, share those thoughts down below. Subscribe today, and of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.